Sometimes you've got to wonder whether anyone is actually in charge of what happens in this country. Last week, as you know, the High Court overturned a decades-old precedent and ruled that foreigners who'd committed serious crimes couldn't be kept indefinitely in immigration detention, meaning that the worst of the worst that their own countries don't want back will be set free onto the streets and suburbs of Australia. Despite a warning from the court this change might be looming back in June, the Albanese government, from the Prime Minister down, were asleep at the wheel on national security. Initially, the Home Affairs Minister, Clare said that there was nothing the government could do, nothing they could do about the release into the community of some 80 convicted criminals, murderers, rapists, pedophiles, because she insisted you can't out-legislate the High Court.
The idea that it is open to the Australian government to simply legislate away a High Court decision is not how our Constitution works.
But the outcry was such that the very next day she did introduce legislation that she boasted was incredibly tough.
The person the leader of the opposition loves to present himself as a tough guy on the borders. He never wrote laws as tough as this, Speaker. He never wrote laws as tough as this.
Yep, Minister, so tough it lasted about 2 hours before the government was begging the opposition to help them amend it because the minister's so tough draft didn't have any security measures to protect the community from these criminals. No warnings for victims, no rules to keep them away from working with children, no rules to require the wearing of an ankle bracelet so the police at least would know where they were. Now, if you thought that wasn't bad enough, well, wait for this, because today we discover that the requirement to wear the ankle bracelet isn't even being properly enforced. Despite the new laws being passed last Thursday, on Monday, the West Australian Police Commissioner said that 4 sex offenders had been released from immigration detention in that state, but had remained without any security bracelets.
No, we don't have the authority to monitor people who are lawfully in our community. There's only 4 reportable offenders that we are responsible for to monitor under very stringent conditions, and if they breach their reporting obligations, then we can charge them with an offence and hopefully get them locked back up.
Right.
That's our plan. Right. For those.
They're not, these 4 that you're talking about, they're not under GPS trackers right now.
They're not under GPS trackers.
In on Breakfast Television today, the Minister in charge, Clare, well, she did not know whether those released sex offenders were wearing ankle bracelets 36 hours after the Commissioner just said they were not. Have a listen.
Everyone who has been released from detention has been placed on the new visa arrangements, and Minister Giles is doing a good job of operationalising that scheme at the moment.
OK, so the ankle bracelets are on, the curfews are in place.
Yep.
Okay.
So the ankle bracelets and the curfews are being rolled out at the moment, Carl.
There's a difference between being rolled out and the ankle bracelets are on, though. Are they on?
So so I'll let Minister Giles speak to that. I certainly know that many people have had those curfews and ankle monitoring bracelets rolled out.
Now, just listen to that. She is the most senior Border Protection Minister in the country. And instead, she's just blathered and buck past, blaming her junior minister, Andrew Giles, saying basically it's his job, not hers, to consider each of these cases on an individual basis. Now, if he has, and that's a big if, he's either decided that convicted sex offenders should not have bracelets, or he hasn't managed to convey that decision, that they should, to the WA Police. Now, maybe he hasn't even made a decision. Given his form today, perhaps the papers are still sitting on his desk. But it gets worse. Also today, the New South Wales Attorney General, so the state's top law officer, Michael Daly, could not say when quizzed about it on Sydney radio whether released foreign criminals in New South Wales were too wearing bracelets.
Look, as you say, Mark, that's a federal matter. I haven't had a briefing on that, but I trust that the authorities at the state and federal level would do a very, very good job of tracking offenders.
But we've got detainees in New South Wales, do we not?
Well, we have detainees in New South Wales coming out of the New South Wales prison system that are surveilled, if you like, by corrections officers, and they do a terrific job.
And you haven't been briefed?
on the federal aspect of it, no, that's a matter for the police to do.
Now, when pushed, Daly said that keeping tabs on these released foreign criminals wasn't his job. It was a job, he said, for police to deal with.
But you're telling me the Attorney-General, the top lawmaker in New South Wales, has not been briefed by his federal counterpart? No, that would be a matter for the police and corrections to deal with that. The Attorneys-General don't deal with surveillance of offenders on the streets once they've been through the court system.
Now, honestly, you couldn't make this stuff up. If it was a plot in a movie, you'd say, look, that's just not plausible. But here we have the Home Affairs Minister at a federal level failing to take any notice of a judicial warning that foreign criminals might soon be out in the streets because she claimed that it was unlikely they would lose the case.
We were advised that it was likely that the Commonwealth would win the case, that is, allow us to do what we wanted to do, which is keep these people in detention.
How recently did you receive that advice?
Well, we received that advice from the Department of Home Affairs, who tell us what chances we have of success and failure in each legal case. But I do need you to understand that...
When did you receive that advice?
I do need you to understand that our department is one of the most litigated against departments of the Commonwealth.
Those lines she's running, they're utter rubbish. I mean, she must think I came down in the last shower. Then she said there was nothing she could do about it anyway.
To simply legislate away a High Court decision is not how our Constitution works.
That's right, you heard that. Then she said legislation was going to fix it all.
He never wrote laws as tough as this, Speaker. He never wrote laws as tough as this.
Then she said she didn't know that it had been fixed because it was actually someone else's job and that she hadn't been briefed on it anyway.
There's a difference between being rolled out and the ankle bracelets are on, though. Mm-hmm. Are they on?
So I'll let Minister Giles speak to that. I certainly know that many people have had those curfews and ankle monitoring bracelets rolled out.
And then to compound all of this official denial of reality and evasion of responsibility at a federal level, there's a replay of the same hand washing and a not my jobbery at a state level as well.
Look, as you say, Mark, that's a federal matter. I haven't had a briefing on that.
Honestly, why on earth do we even have elected ministers if all they do is wait to get briefed? They don't ask to get briefed, they wait to get briefed and then passively go along with whatever has been advised. And since when have elected, unelected and unaccountable officials been the people really in charge of our borders? And what's the point of them anyway? If the end result of all of this briefing and dithering and matters falling between different jurisdictions is that the law isn't enforced anyway and dangerous criminals are unmonitored on our streets. What's also come to light this afternoon after my colleague Andrew Clennell has picked up some detail is the backtracking from Clare O'Neill about her claim that officials told her that the government would not lose the High Court case, which explains, so her logic goes, why she had no plan B in the event that they would lose, which is exactly what happened.
We were advised that it was likely that the Commonwealth would win the case. We received that advice from the Department of Home Affairs, who tell us what chances we have of success and failure in each legal case.
But as Clennell reported earlier this afternoon, that's at odds with documents now released by the High Court that appear to suggest the federal government tried to cut a deal back in May to avoid the recent court case loss. And when pushed on this, today the Minister, she didn't repeat her earlier claim that her department told her she was going to win. Have a listen.
I was not referring to legal advice when I made comments about the Commonwealth's prospects in that case. I do not, will not ever talk about the legal advice that is provided to the Commonwealth. What I was referring to was operational and policy conversations that were happening with my department that we felt might potentially change the outcome of the case. Specifically, could we remove the complainant from the country and end the High Court decision?
Tripped up and now backtracking. Is it any wonder that voters are steadily losing faith in this government? Is it any wonder when people we elect don't seem to be in charge, and when the people who are in charge don't seem capable of doing their jobs, telling us straight what's going on, and when they do stuff up, admitting their mistakes and fixing it all as best as they can? Now, clearly this is a government with ministers out of their depth, led by a Prime Minister who's out of the country and out of touch.